they don't want to be in the position of losing that money.
Andrew, I read on the other side of the commercial break, the email to Sidney Powell that Sidney Powell forwarded to Maria Bartiromo. This email is the entire case for Sidney Powell's attacks on the Dominion voting machines and for Fox's attacks. And the last third of the email, written by this woman who we've never heard of before this email or since, she's talking about how she listens to the wind, she has visions, she sees things and hears things that no one else can. She was shot once, but there was no evidence of a gunshot wound. All these unbelievably delusional, insane things. They're all right there in the very same email that Maria Bartiromo and Fox use as their proof for the case they're making against Dominion. That email's going to be in court as an exhibit. It is possible that Dominion could call that woman who wrote that email as a witness. But if we get to this stage, this trial stage in this case, how is the jury going to see an email like that as the basis for your attacks on this company?
So, you're asking the lawyer on this in this group, and I'm talking to two journalists here. And would either of you ever in a million years read something like this and report it out? And the answer is, of course not, any more than I would think that I'm going to base a criminal case or even a civil case on this woman's testimony. And she obviously, and it's sort of sad. I mean, she obviously has mental issues. What's not sad is the way it was weaponized, to use the Republican term, because this is going to be a leading exhibit at the trial. It is so damaging that you have a host of a nightly show who saw this and read it and was exposed to it. It wasn't just Sidney Powell saying, "Trust me, I've got a source." They had it in their hands and yet went forward. So this again is why Fox is really, it's hard to imagine what their legal strategy is that allowed this case to go so far, to allow all of this to come out. And the one final point I'd want to make is, just to be clear, if they hadn't attacked Dominion, we would not know about this. They would have been lying to a fare thee well just as much about Donald Trump and everything that happened. And the only reason we know is the happenstance that they went too far, because lying to the American public, there's not going to be a lawsuit that you can bring against that. But because they lied and hurt Dominion, that's the reason that we know about not just what they did to Dominion, but what they were doing to the voters. And it's real. That really is the take home of this. And it's just gratuitous that when we were lucky that Dominion brought this lawsuit that benefits all of us to see what was going on.
Well, it turns out, as we know tonight, the Dominion machines worked. They delivered an accurate election.
I want to say this, that whenever all that was going on, right after the election, this was before January 6th. There were so many people, and I'm talking about good, honest to God people that, even preachers around in this area, that was solely convinced of the lie that this machine had deliberately, purposely throwed the election to the point of making Donald Trump not the president, and basically the Republican Party being the president, pertaining to Mr. Biden. This is the reason why that it was essential. It was absolutely imperative. Whenever God got me out of bed after the night of the election, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, God got me out of bed and said, "This is what I want you to say." Because it had already been discovered in the spirit world towards what was fixing to happen and what was going to go on. And I revealed that to my customers or my viewing audience. I revealed that to them, and it just went through one ear and out the other. And people around in this area just thought that they were so right because they supported the ideology of Donald Trump. Once more, understanding that a group of people in my own home state, in my own home country, was more motivated towards trying to make me look wrong or ugly than they was right. This has been an ongoing pattern that has persistently, consistently went on towards various people that could basically care less about any of the things that I had to say about God or about the prophecies of the Bible or about end time events that now the world is tragically suffering through, that is only intensifying and getting worse and worse and worse. Unbelievable in what now is being discovered in the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God.
And we are lucky enough that that company had the resources to be able to sue Fox. They had enough money, which takes a massive amount of money to get this far in this lawsuit. And a lot of other companies wouldn't be able to do it, or they just would choose not to do it. We're going to have so much more on this as we continue to cover this lawsuit. Andrew Weissman and Charles Blow, thank you both very much for joining us on this important night. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. And coming up, the pathological lies of Tucker Carlson about January 6th that he delivered last night went too far for Mitch McConnell and other Republican senators and any sane person with a sense of decency. Congressman Adam Schiff, a member of the January 6th committee, will join us next.
I believe the Republican Party, for the most part, you're still going to have your hardcore, oh no, I wasn't wrong, I was right. You're still going to have those hardcore, belligerent people that is going to that would deny the truth even all the way to the end, that they was wrong, while people like myself was right. But by and large, I believe that you're beginning to discover that even the Republican Party and certain people in the Republican Party is now acknowledging that they have been bamboozled. They have been tricked. They have been deceived. They took the bait, hook, line, and sinker, and now the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, is now exposing itself. And it always does. It always does. It may take a little bit of time before it finally gets out there, but it always does in regards towards the trueness of truth.
Here's Mitch McConnell's reaction to Tucker Carlson's lies last night.
With regard to the presentation on Fox News last night, I want to associate myself entirely with the opinion of the chief of the Capitol Police about what happened on January 6th. Clearly, the chief of the Capitol Police, in my view, correctly describes what most of us witnessed firsthand on January 6th. So that's my reaction to it. It was a mistake, in my view, for Fox News to depict this in a way that's completely at variance with what our chief law enforcement official here at Capitol thinks.
history might show that that is the very first time Mitch McConnell has used the word mistake to describe what Fox does. The statement that he was holding up by the Capitol Police Chief Tom Manger says, last night an opinion program aired commentary that was filled with offensive and misleading conclusions about the January 6th attack. The program conveniently cherry-picked from the calmer moments of our 41,000 hours of video. The commentary fails to provide context about the chaos and violence that happened before or during these less tense moments. Finally, the most disturbing accusation from last night was that our late friend and colleague Brian Sicknick's death had nothing to do with his heroic actions on January 6th. The department maintains, as anyone with common sense would, that had Officer Sicknick not fought valiantly for hours on the day he was violently assaulted, Officer Sicknick would not have died the next day. In response to Tucker Carlson's program, the family of Officer Brian Sicknick released a written statement saying in part, what will it take to silence the lies from people like Carlson? What will it take to convince people that the January 6th insurrection was very real, was very violent, and that the event was orchestrated by a man who is every bit as corrupt and evil as Vladimir Putin? Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff of California. He served on the January 6th Select Committee and was the lead impeachment manager for the first impeachment trial of Donald Trump. He's currently a candidate for the United States Senate in California. Congressman Schiff, one of the strange things that we're learning tonight about what the statement we just heard from Officer Sicknick's family is that Tucker Carlson apparently privately agrees with that view of Donald Trump. The Sicknick family did not say, we hate Donald Trump passionately. Tucker Carlson said that he hates Trump passionately.
You're absolutely right. I mean, it really ought to take our breath away, and yet we've so come to expect this of the Tucker Carlsons of the world, in which, in their world, you lie when it's useful, you lie to make money, you lie to mislead people, you lie for ratings. That's Tucker Carlson's world. Donald Trump is the original propagator of the lies. Tucker Carlson is the amplifier of the lies. And to see, so shockingly in black and white what he's saying internally, his acknowledgement that it's all a lie and nothing matters but the ratings and the money. And this is the person that Kevin McCarthy decides to trust with 40,000 plus hours of Capitol, surveillance video. It just shows how wholly bankrupt Republican leadership is, that they would do such a thing. McCarthy is described sometimes as an empty suit. He's worse than an empty suit. He's a suit that's filled with nothing but ambition and lies. And to trust someone like Tucker Carlson with that footage to help him, to aid and abet the further misleading of the American people, it's just unconscionable.
We are going to squeeze in a commercial break right here so that we can keep our discussion going. We're going to be back right after this with more from Congressman Schiff.
It's actually probably one of the most disgraceful things that goes beyond Watergate, Blackwater, and all the other controversial moments. It's that bad.
Down there. And I saw maybe a few tourists, a few people who got caught up in things, but when you see police barricades breached, when you see police officers assaulted, all of that, or you had to be in close proximity to it, if you were just a tourist, you should have probably lined up at the visitor center and came in on an orderly basis.
Back with us is Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff of California, a member of the January 6th committee. Speaker McCarthy said today that he didn't see what Tucker Carlson did last night. He didn't watch the show. He gave him all of this video and thought it was unimportant enough to not watch what Tucker Carlson did with it. Tucker Carlson did the obvious, which was to show some piece of it where there was no violence in the course of that day. We all know that kind of video exists. But Kevin McCarthy's pretending he doesn't know what happened on that show last night.
Yeah, of course, nobody believes Kevin McCarthy, and they shouldn't. He knows exactly what happened on that show. He would have to be living in a cave not to be aware of it. And I often don't find myself in agreement with Tom Tillis, but I do here. I was in the building that day. I saw what the insurrectionists were trying to do. No one who was there that day could help but conclude that this was a violent effort to stop the peaceful transfer of power. But Lawrence, to return to the
People such as myself that was trying to help the general public was actually shamed. We was looked down upon, made fun of. At first. Until now, the truth is coming out. But you know, I've been shamed illegitimately, basically ever since those 9 tapes went to the White House in 1988. So to me, to get this type of persecution is really old hat to me. And I'm not saying that it don't hurt, because it does, but I become callous to it to the degree that I almost now expect a certain amount of dislike, a certain amount of rejection, a certain amount of ridicule coming from the general public, because I had been exposed to it for so long and lengthy of a time. So, you know, some of these people that now are going to have to eat crow and walk around with egg on their face, because the truth is being exposed.
to the question that the Sicknick family asked in that statement, what is it going to take to stop Tucker Carlson from telling these lies, to stop this effort to rewrite history about January 6th? Because at Fox, for Tucker Carlson, for Sean Hannity, for Rupert Murdoch, for all these people, Laura Ingraham, it's only about the money. It's only about ratings and money. The only way to stop it is for Dominion to succeed, for it to cost Fox billions, and what's more, for American companies to decide that as long as Murdoch and Fox are putting these divisive, sociopathic liars on the air, American companies aren't going to advertise there anymore. The only way to stop, a corporation that has gone completely off the rails and is tearing the country apart is to say, I'm going to stop paying for that. And this is what has to happen in terms of the broader effort to rewrite history. We have to.
In other words, everybody needs to boycott Fox.
Enabling.
That's what he's saying.
Enabling people like Kevin McCarthy to run the House of Representatives. It has to be both an attack on Fox's profit at all cost motive, and putting someone like Kevin McCarthy in charge of an institution of government.
And Kevin McCarthy knows that it was so violent that he was removed from the Capitol, put in a car, and driven away to another location, a military location. That's how dangerous it was. And Kevin McCarthy knows that. Congressman Adam Schiff, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
My name is Tanya.
I think the reason why that some people either has trouble accepting the truth, or that they have become so callous to the outroaring events that went on with Donald J. Trump. This wasn't the first time that we have seen almost bloodshed right there around the Capitol and around the White House. I mean, there has been an ongoing uproar with Donald Trump ever since he come down that elevator in trying to hoodwink the American people. And probably people like the commentator that you're talking about on Fox.
That was tonight's last word.
Probably thinks that, well, this is just old hat, and we're supposed to accept it as American citizens. And the thing about it is, none of this was acceptable from the get-go, that various politicians, especially your Republican politicians, sat idly by and acted as if it was not a big deal. So what was their primary motive? What was they hoping for? What was they sitting back, basically trying to pull the wool over the American people's eyes. What was in it for them? One must ask.
Hour with Stephanie Rule starts now.
Tonight, a look behind the scenes at Fox News during the 2020 election, with texts and emails released as part of Dominion's $1.6 billion lawsuit. Hosts continue to push Trump's debunked big lie, with Rupert Murdoch questioning if they went too far. Then Tucker Carlson cherry-picking and flat-out misrepresenting the events of January 6th. The condemnation we're hearing from some Republican lawmakers. And the brutal kidnapping in Mexico. 2 Americans dead, 2 survivors back on American soil. The warnings to Americans traveling to that area as the 11th hour gets underway on this Tuesday night. Good evening once again. I'm Stephanie Rule. We are still digging into a mountain of new evidence tonight. A brand new court filing in the $1.6 billion defamation suit from Dominion Voting Systems against Fox News dropped just a few hours ago. And the latest trove of documents includes text messages, emails, and depositions that reveal even more about what was going on inside the network as it regularly pushed Donald Trump's lies that the 2020 election was stolen. These new documents show Fox News chairman Rupert Murdoch himself was asked directly about that during his deposition in January of this year. He was asked, quote, "Have you ever believed that Dominion was engaged in a massive and coordinated effort to steal the 2020 presidential election?" Murdoch replied, "No." He was also asked, "Have you ever believed that Dominion committed election fraud by rigging the 2020 presidential election?" Murdoch responded, "No. I have never seen any evidence." The filing also included this email from January of 2021 from Murdoch to Fox News CEO Suzanne Scott, where he writes, "Still getting mud thrown at us. Maybe Sean and Laura went too far." Of course, referring to primetime anchors Laura Ingraham and Sean Hannity. With that, let's get smarter with the help of our lead-off panel tonight. Jeff Bennett is here, the co-anchor of PBS NewsHour and PBS's chief Washington correspondent and an MSNBC political contributor. Jeremy Peters joins us, political reporter for the New York Times. Meg Reston is here, a national political reporter at the Washington Post, and former federal prosecutor Renato Mariotti is also a legal affairs columnist for Politico. Jeremy, I wanted you to be here because you go inside Fox News every day. You are reporting. What sticks out to you the most in this filing?
I think what you see first and foremost is almost a kind of contempt for President Trump coming from some unlikely sources, namely Tucker Carlson and his producers. And the reason this is so ironic, of course, is few people on Fox News have been as big cheerleaders for President Trump as Tucker Carlson. So what he's saying privately, things like he thinks what Trump is doing by refusing to concede the election is disgusting. He says at one point about Trump, "I hate him passionately." And these are the kinds of things that you knew certain people in Trump's orbit said privately, but they never really leak out into the public. Well, this leaked out in a pretty big way, and it's all the more striking because somebody like Tucker Carlson is now trying to rewrite the history of the 2020 presidential election, say that it was corrupt and dishonest, which he said last night on his show. Well, we have texts from November 2020 when he says that all of this voter fraud stuff sounds completely insane to him, and it's crazy, and that the president needs to stop doing it.
Crazy. Renato, does this new dump, does all this information make Dominion's case even stronger?
Yeah, it's really hard for me to see, frankly, how Dominion hasn't extracted a massive settlement from Fox News already. I really think the only explanation is that Dominion thinks they have such a strong hand that they are not, they are holding all of this over Fox News' head, and they're demanding a massive settlement. Frankly, this is what proof of actual malice looks like. I use those words, actual malice. Stephanie, that is the very high standard that there is in a First Amendment lawsuit. You have to prove that the other side actually knew they were lying or they had reckless disregard for the truth. Usually a non-starter. That's the sort of thing you can never actually prove. Almost impossible to do. And here, that's literally what the Fox executives are admitting people like Rupert Murdoch. Unbelievable.
Okay, but then this is what doesn't make sense about that argument, because on its face, I totally agree with you. I'm like, yeah, oh my gosh, Dominion has the best hand ever and Fox is screwed. But does Fox believe that they're not? Because given all the evidence that's been out there, wouldn't you think that they would be telling their anchors, dial it back, pipe down, when in fact, turn on Fox News tonight. Tucker Carlson is double, triple, quadrupling down.
Yeah, I think that Dominion is an unusual case because there you actually have a plaintiff that's suffering monetarily. In other words, this isn't a public figure that is essentially, okay.
This is kind of a brand new field that the American people aren't really used to or adapted to. There's all kinds of wars. There's psychological war, there's chemical war, there's biological war, there's spiritual war, there's emotional war, there's political war, there's all kinds of wars. But this is literally a media war. A media war that is going on in front of the American people pertaining to an actual war, a physical war that went on January the 6th. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of people in a lot of especially a lot of your communist controlled countries are probably thinking, my God, how far are these people willing to go towards airing out their dirty laundry? Okay? And I realize that that's just one perspective that people can take, because ordinarily these communist controlled countries that are dictators to their own people, they don't air out their laundry like this. They don't debate things openly like this. So from another perspective, I hope that it is enlightening to a great deal of people in understanding that sometimes open debate is the only way to get to the bottom of what actually occurred, and not trying to dress it up or smear it up or paint it up in any other way other than it being pure, mere, raw footage. And that's what we're seeing basically revealing itself to not only the American people but the world. So I hope and pray that those that does watch this, analyze this, look at this, that they will take it in the right perspective, is that this is our democracy towards how that we handle our things. And ordinarily things get handled like this in behind the doors, to the point that most of the time the general public don't have to see it and experience it and witness it. But with it being such of a public matter out in the public, I don't feel like that there's really no other way that it could have revealed itself other than the way that it's revealing itself, in bringing forth the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, to the American people, so that they will truly understand the significance of all of this, and pray to God that it will never, ever, ever happen again.
Tucker Carlson is making up lies about an officer and how he was injured, for example, on January 6th. Here you actually have a company that is willing to go to the mattresses in the lawsuit and put preservation notices out there so that they actually had all these emails and communications. I think this was during the pandemic when Rupert Murdoch was communicating more in writing than he was usually. I really think that they have evidence here that my guess is they don't, actually have in writing in other cases. So I suspect Fox is being more careful behind the scenes. Now they're being more careful about what they actually know, as opposed to saying privately that they are know that this is false. And so I just think that's what they're doing, because this is their business model.
I don't know. Anybody who knows anything about January 6th would beg to differ, given what Tucker Carlson has been saying for the last 48 hours. Jeff, what do you think?
I think that what has been revealed in these documents really serve as the most visceral and tangible proof of what has been the strongest criticism of Fox News for decades, that it is really a political operation, a propaganda machine, and a business enterprise that uses the veneer of news and wraps itself in the name of news, when in fact that's not at all what it is. Any traditional news organization, Steph, and I know you know this to be true, if they called a state the way that Fox did, called Arizona for Joe Biden, not just first, but called it days ahead of any other network, that would be celebrated. But within Fox News, there was a sense of crisis because they realized that their audience was recoiling from the truth. And that's what this all speaks to. That's why these primetime Fox personalities are pretending, saying one thing about Donald Trump, disparaging Donald Trump and his supporters in private, but then going on the air and saying something else. Why? Because they were concerned about their market share. They were concerned about losing viewers to their upstart right-wing rivals, OANN and Newsmax. And you saw that in one of the previous document dumps where Tucker Carlson was talking about the stock price, probably because in addition to probably because a lot of his salary is actually stock. I imagine that's one of the reasons why he was concerned about that. And so what drives Fox is not investigative reporting. It's not being determined truth seekers and truth tellers. It's about the bottom line. It's about profits.
Okay, we're just going to call tonight's show, I Guess I Don't Get It. To all of Jeff's points, Maeve, if I'm a Fox News viewer, at this point, it is clear as day that I get lied to every night of the week and Saturdays. Even if I love Fox, even if those are my homeboys, I don't want to get lied to by my best friend, and I call them out and I'm pissed. Why aren't their viewers angry?
Well, I think it's going to be so fascinating to see what the fallout is from all of this. I mean, as you know, we're so siloed in this country where, Fox viewers are not watching other channels and getting their news from other channels. So when they see, tonight, this betrayal that we see in the text messages by Tucker Carlson, the way in which Trump has been talked about behind the scenes, I mean, I think it's just going to be really fascinating to see whether Fox News can continue to be the arbiter going forward in the 2024 Republican primary, for example, or whether we're going to see much more of a splintering and fracturing in terms of who's actually driving the narrative on the right after all of this has emerged, because it's so messy and so embarrassing. And it's going to be fascinating to see how Trump responds to all of this. And whether he even acknowledges what's been laid out here today.
Well, he's
Jeremy,
not.
let's go back to the point you just made about what Tucker Carlson himself said about Trump. You mentioned it, but I want to lay it out again. We're on January of 2021. He was fed up with Trump, saying, "We are very close to being able to ignore Trump most nights. I truly cannot wait." He then said, "I hate him passionately." If this is how Tucker Carlson felt about Donald Trump, why in God's name has he been carrying his water, pushing the big lie for months and months and months? Why didn't he just say, Trump lost, he failed us, let's get on the DeSantis train?
Two things: relevance and ratings. Tucker Carlson wants both, and he's had both as long as he stays loyal to Trump and criticizes him gently enough that he doesn't so enrage the Trump base. But as Meg was saying, the Trump base may not ever really know what's in these texts, or they may never know that Tucker Carlson spoke so disparagingly and disdainfully about Trump, because Fox isn't actually covering this. They have a blackout
And they're not
on this
punishing.
story.
They're also not punishing any of their anchors.
No,
right? You've seen Rupert Murdoch is basically calling out Maria Bartiromo, saying, not our news anchors, it was maybe that one over there. And bet your bottom dollar, she's going to be on TV tomorrow morning.
Tucker Carlson will remain on TV. Sean Hannity, who Rupert, said, whoa, I think,
too far.
Too far. And he says other things about Sean that are very critical in these text messages. At one point, he says, well, it's fine that that Sean has kind of come around privately and said that he thinks that Trump has really hurt himself and hurt the country, but what's he been telling his viewers all these weeks? And that's ultimately what is driving this, is it's about viewership. Fox, Tucker Carlson, and all the anchors there, for the most part, are only going to start criticizing Trump or backing away from him if they know that's where their audience is. Right now, that's not where their audience is. Polls are showing that Trump is still the big dog in the Republican primary field.
Isn't their audience where they tell their audience to be?
Not anymore. Maybe it used to have that power, back 10, 15 years ago. But right now, what these documents show so vividly and in such jarring detail is just how terrified Fox executives were of their audience.
Jeff, let's go back to the point you made a moment ago about several Fox News anchors being angry about Fox News accurately calling the Arizona race. I want to share a text exchange between Laura Ingraham, Tucker Carlson, and Sean Hannity, the primetime trifecta, where Ingraham writes, "My anger at the news channel is pronounced." Carlson responds, "It should be. We devote our lives to building an audience, and they let Chris Wallace and Leyland Vitter wreck it too much." And Hannity writes, "Too much is correct. I'm disgusted at this point." Can you just inform our audience, Jeff, how a news organization works? How news anchors sitting in front of a camera have absolutely no influence at a respectable news organization over how an election is being called. We sit in our seats and we wait for the decision desk to tell us, and then Steve Kornacki gets up with the calculator and breaks it all down. Can you imagine us sitting there and going, oh, disgusting, let's do something else?
Not in a million years. Proper news organizations are siloed because that is the way it's supposed to work. We as reporters, you as an anchor, we don't have decision-making responsibilities when it comes to calling races and when it comes to articulating the overall editorial vision for the network. And for years, Fox always made this case that, well, our dayside reporting, that's straight reporting. And then when you get into the prime time, that's where you get the opinion and the perspective. What you see from the documents is that no, really, from Rupert Murdoch to the powerful personalities in primetime on down, is that they were the folks who were calling the shots, and they were the folks who were making the ultimate decisions about news gathering, about news judgment, about editorial value, and about, at the end of the day, what they were going to say on the air about Donald Trump and preserving and pushing all of the lies that he was telling about the 2020 election.
Well, our audience is in luck tonight talking about serving the audience. Do you know why? Because all of our guests have agreed to stay with us. When we come back, the one thing that has Senators Schumer and McConnell on the same page, here's a hint, it has to do with Tucker Carlson's take on January 6th. And later, 4 Americans kidnapped in Mexico, but tonight, only 2 have returned home alive. We're going to bring you the latest on what in the world is going on, and is it safe for you to go to that part of Mexico? 11th hour, just getting underway on a very busy Tuesday night.
It's never been safe to go to Mexico. It's never been safe. But then again, is America safe right now? Pertaining to all the street shootings and the killings and the stabbings and everything else going on? It's not a safe world, period. It's not a safe world. Unbelievable how the devil is raging right now. And people still don't get it that we're under a siege. That's what I've been saying all along. We're under a siege. We're under a siege. We're under a spiritual siege. It's now dipping into other natural entities such as the weather and people and etc.
It's all the more shameful because Speaker McCarthy knows damn well what kind of customer Mr. Carlson is. McCarthy's not at all surprised about this outcome. And he probably even feels no remorse. Even more shameful.
It was a mistake, in my view, for Fox News to depict this in a way that's completely at variance with what our chief law enforcement official here at the Capitol thinks.
Something you don't see every day. Senate leaders Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell criticizing Tucker Carlson for misrepresenting the events of January 6th as mostly peaceful chaos. And Republican Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina took it a step further and said this.
I think it's bull when you see police barricades breached, when you see police officers assaulted, all of that, or you had to be in close proximity to it. If you were just a tourist, you should have probably lined up at the visitor center and came in on an orderly basis. So I just don't think it's helpful.
Sure isn't. One of Tucker's segments focused on Brian Sicknick. Remember him? The Capitol police officer who was there on January 6th in the midst of it all, and the next day he died. We're not going to show you any of Tucker's broadcasts last night out of respect for the Sicknick family and for the truth. But today, Brian's family released a statement, and their voices deserve to be heard, where they write, "The Sicknick family is outraged at the ongoing attack on our family, but the unscrupulous and outright sleazy so-called news network of Fox News, who will do the bidding of Trump or any of his sycophant followers, no matter what the damage is done to the families of the fallen." Jeff Bennett, Jeremy Peters, Maeve Reston, and Renato Mariotti still with us. Jeremy, help me out. Tucker Carlson, exclusively, nobody else, gets 44,000 hours of video. And in the last two nights, when he has 2 hours, 120 minutes of television to put on, he hears just a few minutes. And he spends all of the rest of his time pushing baseless claims with no video to back it up.
Right, because he knows what's on that tape. His producers know what's on that tape. They spent all this time scrounging for evidence that they couldn't ultimately produce, that this was somehow really a peaceful protest of meek sightseers, as Tucker put it the other night. Now, they didn't show, of course, the Capitol police officers getting bludgeoned, getting pepper sprayed. They didn't really tell you the full story of how terrified the people were. It's sitting in the Senate chamber. They're literally running for their lives as rioters closed in. And it's because they don't have an answer, right? I mean, the whitewashing of history that has taken place about January 6th is really one of the more extraordinary things that I have ever seen in politics. The idea that you can convince people who were there, who saw the rioters smashing the glass in the place where they work, the seat of American democracy. And within weeks, once President Trump started saying, oh no, this was Antifa, those weren't our people, this wasn't really that big of a deal, they changed their tune, and so did the tune of many of their voters. You know, it's really remarkable how quickly and effectively they were able to scrub this history.
But they couldn't, because here we are telling the truth every night, and there's actually Republicans who are mad about it, Jeff. So a move like this that Kevin McCarthy made, giving this video to Tucker Carlson, it's infuriated and sickened the law enforcement community. Republicans, like a Tom Tillis, like a Mitch McConnell, are not happy about it. But what is Kevin McCarthy doing? Sticking to his guns. He's saying he does not regret giving Tucker Carlson these videos. On what planet was this a good move for the speaker?
Because he had to give him those videos in order to become speaker. I think the why of this is so interesting. Why did Kevin McCarthy turn over 44,000 hours worth of video exclusively to Tucker Carlson? It's because it became part of the negotiations that McCarthy was having with those far-right members of his conference in order to get the speaker's gavel. During one of the vote series, Tucker Carlson went on air and said, McCarthy, there are two things that you could do. One, release all of the January 6th files and all of the video, not some of it, all of it. And in the 2 months since he became speaker, that's precisely what he's done. And the other reason why this is important, Steph, is because we don't know all the things that McCarthy had to agree to in order to become House Speaker. That list of concessions, nobody knows what it is apart from him and the far-right sort of rebel rousers in his conference. It's still under lock and key.
Jeff, I know you talked to some January 6th investigators today about this video. What'd you learn?
It's really interesting. I spoke today with the person who was the senior investigative counsel for the January 6th committee. This is somebody who, for the better part of a year, investigated not just what transpired on January 6th, but the people who planned the riot and those who attended it. And on this specific issue of Brian Sicknick, we heard from the U.S. Capitol Police Chief today. In his words, he said it was the most disturbing allegation that Officer Sicknick's death had nothing to do with his heroic actions on January 6th. That the Capitol Police Force in particular was really just disgusted by that suggestion, that assertion from Tucker Carlson. And what I heard from this investigator is that one of the reasons why the January 6th committee never showed video of Officer Sicknick was because they weren't sure who he was. And so who he was in the surveillance video. And so the idea that Tucker Carlson is now saying with confidence, oh, this is him, we should not take that at face value. Because the people who were involved in the actual investigating never made that determination on their own.
And at the same time, what is Tucker Carlson doing? He is still questioning the outcome of the 2020 election on his air tonight, last night. Renato, could any of these continuous false claims on the part of Tucker have any impact on the Dominion case?
Well, sure. Ultimately, this is set to go to trial not that long from today. I don't expect a motion for summary judgment to be granted in full. They almost never are when the plaintiff is for summary judgment. I think there's very well could be a trial here, and Tucker's going to be on the stand. And I will tell you, there's nothing that jurors are going to like less than someone who's totally unapologetic and unrepentant. I think it'll be very difficult for Tucker to explain after all this time with those text messages how he's still peddling the same falsehoods and the same lies. So yeah, I think it's going to be an issue for him. But right, they don't care. That's their business model. They have to keep doing what they're doing.
Maeve, a minute ago, Jeremy was saying that, you saw conservative media and some Republicans, for some voters, successfully whitewash January 6th and say, put it behind us. And there are a lot of voters out there, Republican voters, who are saying, I don't want to talk about January 6th anymore. Why isn't Fox News giving them that? Why would they continue to push conspiracies when their viewers, their voters, don't even want to hear about it anymore?
Well, it's so true. And you hear that from voters all over the country, Republican primary voters who are saying, why are we still talking about these things? Like, let's move forward. Those are the people who are open to people like Ron DeSantis and the others who are running. So it is really kind of curious when you think about it, like whose interest is this actually serving to be going back and trying to litigate again January 6th for all of these hours as Tucker Carlson is doing. The only person whose interest it serves is Trump. And it's really baffling because many of the people who still like Trump would really like to see him move on to something else and talk about a forward-looking agenda. So I don't know how, his universe of voters who would support him is actually growing through this exercise, besides the fact that it's a really upsetting whitewash for everyone else who has to watch it.
Doing it to serve Trump, the guy that Tucker Carlson said he hates passionately. Again, we had an amazing smart panel here, and I still don't get it. Jeremy Peters, Renato Mariotti, Jeff Bennett, and Maeve Reston, thank you all. When we come back, a political pep rally down in Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis lays out what he wants in his State of the State speech, and with a GOP grip on the legislature, he's likely going to get it. Why it could be a clue of what kind of campaign he plans to run in 2024, when the 11th hour continues.
I just want to throw this in real quick.
It's really baffling.
About my opinion about how American people witness this, and I've brought this out before. I'll bring it out again, especially here in America. You keep in mind, we've been brainwashed throughout our lifetime of watching events unfolding on TV that was nothing more or less than Hollywood inventing a script and people following down to its very, very T. Okay? Because of that, it has diminished the realization of TV. And the reason why I say this is because whenever I witnessed what I was witnessing on TV pertaining to the Katrina damage, though you've seen big piles of rubble and though you've seen all the damage in the houses destructive and etc., the realization or the fullness of Katrina did not set into my perspective until I went down there and actually witnessed it and viewed it for myself. I truly believe that TV has basically stained itself because of Hollywood, because of all the movies that are being produced on a day-to-day level now all over the world. But because of it, whenever we're actually witnessing news factual facts being exploited the way that it's being exploited on TV, such as this event or Katrina or the Sandy Hook shooting or whatever, it's either A, unbelievable to the point that people just can't believe it, or B, they've become so callous to watching TV and seeing how that it's basically all scripted in thinking, well, this is too. And because of it, it diminishes the realization of news. News is supposed to be news. And about a third of the time, instead of it being news, it's actually flaunting in the area that that particular news carrier decides to want to flaunt off into for whatever reason. And the majority of their news, and I pick this up all the time, is all bad news. And the sad thing about it is, there's probably almost just as much good news in the world if there are bad news, but because of the way that the media has focused in on all the bad news, that's basically the concept that the American people in the world are under right now. We're under this blanket of believing that the sky is falling and that the worst of the very worst has yet to come. And that is demoralizing to people's incentive. It's demoralizing to diminish people's morale that way. It's demoralizing in what Hollywood has transitioned into the daytime news programs, to the point that now the daytime news programs ain't really news. It's entertainment. And the people in general cannot differentiate the differences between reality versus fiction, fiction versus reality. And because of it, it diminishes news in the sense that whenever people see it, either A, it's unbelievable because they never would have thought that anything like that would have ever occurred, or B, it's old hat. And because it's old hat, they're going to respond to it in the sense of, oh, that's a bad thing, but it ain't that bad. I guarantee you, if you was in the middle of all that during the day that all that took place, in being one of those police officers or any of the above, it wasn't old hat. Just like the people that was engaged in Hurricane Katrina, whenever Katrina hit, it was not just a regular storm. It was a superstorm. And of course, unless you was there, or unless you went and seen the aftermath of what occurred during the event of a major storm like Katrina, you're really not going to get the full grasp of just exactly what had occurred. Now, since then, I have went to other catastrophes, tornado damages, flooding, etc. And I've seen the expression of people's faces. You know, I've seen the damage up front, witnessed it on hand. And because whenever I do witness an occurrence, like I witnessed January the 6th, people like myself does get a fuller perspective of the damage that's being conducted during the time that it's being conducted, because we have been there. We have cut logs, we have moved brush, we have helped people, we have counseled with people, we have been there in seeing the destructionable events like this. And that's really about the only way that I can sum it up from the viewer perspective. From the viewer perspective, is that we, as a society over here in America, has been so subjected to Hollywood and movies and etc. that now it has basically interfered with the concept towards the seriousness of what news is supposed to be about to begin with. You know, news is supposed to be news. It's what is, have you heard the news? What news? You know, news is supposed to be accuracy. News is supposed to be alarming, because most of the time it's not news unless it is alarming. But you can have just as alarming as good news as you do bad news. But because we have been calloused and brainwashed, lied to, manipulated, aggravated, all the above, we now put it in a completely different atmosphere. And the atmosphere usually is an atmosphere of make-believe, which is under the pretense of fiction versus the pretense of reality as far as it being true. And unless you actually went down to southern Mississippi and Louisiana and parts of Alabama and actually got your hands dirty and actually witnessed the extent of how horrifying that Katrina actually was, or unless you was there that day that experienced the whole atmosphere of everything. And whenever I say the atmosphere, I'm just not talking about what you see, but also what you hear, what you smell, how you respond to the aftermath of what has occurred. People crying, people being upset, people being out of breath, people being bruised up, people being banged up, and some even died. Right then and there on the spot. Unless you actually can relate to the realness of that, you're really going to be taken back toward just exactly how serious that these matters are. You're going to be taken back. You know why? Because the general public can no longer relate to the news as it truly being news. That's what Hollywood has done for the past, I guess, now going on 100 years, that has conformed our mental concept in how that we are supposed to relate to the things that we see and hear on TV. It's become confusing, putting out way too many images. It's just an onslaught of how the news itself has been diminished because of all these different signals now that are going out to all these different concepts in a way like we've never ever begun to accept or experience in our lifetime. If somebody, let's say from South America that hadn't never been exposed to TV and electricity, or somebody in Africa or even places in India, for the first time, seen all that hullabaloo that busted loose January the 6th at the Capitol building, before they got through watching it, they would have probably busted out in tears, understanding the depth of just exactly what that they have just seen. But now to us, whenever we witness it, it's like, oh, it's bad, but it ain't that bad. Well, that was the concept that I got pertaining to Katrina damage until I actually went down there. And I understood, and I got the feel of everything, and I heard the testimonies, and I smelt it, and I heard it, and I seen it with my own eyes. Then the fullness, the depth of the realization comes into play towards, my God, this is really, 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 really bad. So really, TV has diminished itself to the point that you really don't get the fullness of what you're witnessing and how that you're seeing it and putting it in the right concept because of all them factors. I want to thank you for listening. Good luck to each and every one of us. Thank you for your prayers. Pray for our leaders. Pray for one another. Pray for the world. I want to say, God bless America. God bless our troops. God bless America's endeavors towards where we go from here. Good luck to each and every one of us. God bless you. May heaven help us all. And shalom.